Hello, my friends, and welcome to the 75th edition of the Hunger Games, or as we call it, what day is it? It's Friday. Friday, NHL Strategy Show playoffs. You can hear me talking. Yeah, the countdown screen didn't go on, and when the countdown screen goes on, our mics get muted. I was just talking shit, but that's what I do. We have a nice 4-game slate. Could be the last 4-game slate of the season, of the playoffs, depending on what Carolina does, depending on what Florida does. If you like 4-game slates.
Yeah, last 4-game slates that will have a show if they wrap the sweep, because there is one on Sunday, but we just don't do shows on Sundays.
Yeah. I got my little guy with me. He might end up on my lap, but it's all right. Switching venues for this slate, Rangers in Washington, Vancouver in Nashville, Winnipeg in Colorado, and Edmonton in LA. Gives us a little bit of talking points instead of just like, oh yeah, McDavid's a really good play. You know what I mean? The matchups change a little bit, this and that. So what's going on with you, Cliffy?
Not a whole lot. I kind of laughed with just the 2 games from the Eastern Conference yesterday, just because they're not like top of the card type games, right? The Battle of Florida is what it is. Like, it is, it's been a good series, but looks like it's going to wrap up. And same thing with Carolina and the Islanders. And putting it up against the NFL, putting those 2 games up against the NFL draft, I think was very intentional by the NHL. But today we have 4 games. Nobody can wrap a series yet. Each team tonight playing their 3rd game. Only the Rangers have a 2-0 series lead. But it's kind of getting to that point where they're starting to sort themselves out, at least by ice time. So we kind of know how the ice time is going to work a little bit. There are some injury notes that we're going to have to talk to through the show, but it is an interesting slate because everybody, you're right. Everybody that was on the road is now at home. You have what could be some pretty big lineup changes for Washington. You have Vancouver going with Casey DeSmith, obviously because of the injury to Thatcher Demko. There's little Spencer coming to join us for a little while. Vancouver also might change up their lines because they did that in the 3rd period of the last game. Now they had an optional skate. We'll get to that game, so we're not sure what's going to happen there. Winnipeg's running back the same roster, only now they're going into Colorado instead of being at home, which is always interesting, and Los Angeles at home to Edmonton. So they can dictate who, especially which defense pairs go out against Connor McDavid. So lots to talk about. Very interesting matchups. Thankfully, other than Vancouver, we know pretty much everybody that's going to play. So kind of excited for the games tonight.
It's like Mr. Bigglesworth here. Let's get into this slate. New York Rangers with a 3.1 total heading into Washington. The Capitals have a 2.4. Rangers won the first 2 games at home. They're both pretty ugly. Panarin with a 0-0-0 DK points last game. That only happened twice this year, I think.
Once. The other time he had 1 block shot, so a 1.3.
Yeah. So, now it's switching to Washington, but the analysis of this game doesn't really change because there isn't really a matchup on either side that's super concerning. Obviously, the Rangers have a 3.1 total, which is a large road total, and Washington just has flat out the lowest total on the slate. Again, if there was ever a game for the Washington Capitals to win in this series, it's usually Game 3 when they go home, they're down 2-0. But I don't have a ton of interest. There's a lot of ownership. It's not a good matchup. And if Washington was going to win this game, it's going to be a slow-paced, ugly hockey game. So full stacking is off the board for me. One off Ovechkin's fine, one off Strome, one off Wilson. Yeah. Like if I had to stack a line, it would be LaPierre, Milano, and Pacioretty if I'm trying to get in Colorado power play or Edmonton power play, just because they're so cheap. They are getting almost 6% ownership, which is like 10x their top two stacks. So that's not ideal, but I really don't love Washington. One-offs are fine, but they're not going to find my way into my single entry lineup. On the Rangers side, it's a bit more interesting. Really expensive Colorado and really expensive Edmonton on this slate. I think New York's going to go overlooked a little bit here, especially that Panarin line at 19,900. They're coming in at 10% projected ownership, which is fairly low for a 4-game slate. 22% top two stack. There isn't a matchup that worries me. Panarin's coming off a bad game. Usually he bounces back. You get Trocheck and Panarin on the top power play. I like them. It's just in my single entry, it's going to be hard to prioritize them over Edmonton or Colorado. So I think they're a pretty good MME play. The Rangers' top line is interesting because they played pretty well the other night. They're coming in with positive leverage. They're only 16,200. You don't need to full stack them. I don't think you can't fit them with Colorado. You might be able to jam them in with Edmonton. But in that situation, I think a Zibanejad one-off is fine. A Kreider one-off is fine. And if we're talking about depth lines that fit with Edmonton and Colorado, I prefer Rangers third line to Washington third line. But those third lines are really only reserved for getting really feisty with some power play stacks.
Yeah, I'll start on the Washington side. Towards the end of the season, when they went to pretty much this configuration, they started using Dylan Strome in the shutdown matchup. So I suspect that Strome, Protas, and Wilson is going to go out against the Panarin line. The reason why that's interesting is Strome and Wilson, in all their minutes without Alex Ovechkin, because Alex Ovechkin was truly one of the worst defensive players in the league this season. In their minutes without Alex Ovechkin, they were really good defensively. 42 shot attempts against per 60, 1.9 expected goals against per 60, 1.3 actual goals against per 60. Like, those are true and genuine shutdown numbers. And Washington might be getting back Nick Jensen tonight, who he's not a tremendous defenseman, but he's certainly an upgrade over the AHLers that they've been having to rotate in on the third line. I think that might make it a tough matchup for the Panarin line. The Panarin line, really good offensively. It is just a tough matchup. Washington is really trying to bog down the games. Panarin he's been getting ice time, but it's not like he's been getting, Nathan McKinnon ice time levels or anything like that, right? 20 and a half minutes in the last game, 17 and a half minutes the game before. I do like the idea of using the Rangers second line, the Panarin line. If you're 20 maxing, 150, those types of things, because you want to get away from what's going to be probably a pretty chalky Colorado team. Full stacking that Panarin line, I'm kind of not super excited about it, just because, yes, they have been very good. They're not getting monster minutes because the Rangers' third line, at the least, has been pretty good, and it's been a reliable line. So they don't need to play Panarin, Trocheck 22, 23, 24 minutes. And then they're getting that Strome matchup, which has been good defensively. I'm kind of out on the Rangers' second line. Getting back to the Caps, I think I agree with you. I'm not full stacking anything. There is going to be a fair bit of ownership on Washington here tonight. First and second lines are at 14, 15% ownership per the top stacks tool, and considerably lower top two stack percentage, 5.8% for the Ovechkin line, 3.5% for the Wilson line. They're going to be owned because you can fit them in with Colorado. That's just basically what it is. I guess a Strome one-off, like you said, a Wilson one-off, I think that's fine. I don't know if I'd go down to the third line. I'm going to be honest. I did not watch it. I purposefully did not watch a lot of Capitals games over the final 6-8 weeks of the season, just because there were better teams to watch. Watching these first two games, Max Pacioretty, like, I hate to say it, I love Pacioretty. I'm a Montreal fan. He was a big part of the franchise for a decade. Like, he's just, after the two Achilles injuries, he's just not the player that he was. Like, he can still pop a goal once in a while, but he's gone from being a dominant winger to maybe he really only should be playing 10 or 11 minutes. So Lapierre on the top power play, like, it's fine if you want to one off him, but there's nothing. I'm with you. There's nothing I want to stack from Washington. I think it's going back to the Zibanejad line for me. They're coming in with positive leverage on the top stacks tool, 8.5% top two stacks, 7.4% ownership. You can't fit them with Colorado, which is why they're not going to get a ton of ownership. I don't think you can even squeeze them in with Edmonton. Like, you probably have to leave off Hyman and maybe put in Bryden Nugent-Hopkins or something like that. But that Roslovic line was really good in the regular season, or the Zibanejad line with Roslovic was really good. 75 shot attempts, 3.1 goals per 60. Zibanejad has 10 shots in the first two games, and that's something we talked about on the last show with the Rangers, was that his shot volume went up a lot after the team got Roslovic to put on his top line, like going from 2.4 to 3.6 shots per game. And he's already at 5 shots per game in the first two games of this series. He's not going to see a lot of that Strome-Wilson matchup, which, again, is their only good defensive matchup. Now, Nick Dowd does take some shutdown minutes, but Washington's also dressing Ivan Miroshnichenko, who's a rookie that probably shouldn't even be in the lineup. So I'm not sure how much Dowd is even going to see of shutdown matchups. I like going back to the Kreider, Zibanejad, Roslovic line. Like, if you're not playing Colorado here tonight, Colorado's top guys anyway, I think that line makes the most sense for me. So for me, it goes Rangers 1, then Rangers 2, then maybe some Cavs 1 off. I think Rangers 3 is in play. Wenberg and Cooley have been able to generate some offense. Kakos look good. I don't know if I would full stack, but I do think like a two-man of like Kako and Cooley or something like that makes sense. But it's the Kreider, Zibanejad, Roslovic line I like quite a bit from this game.
Yeah, and like, I think you can fit them in with Edmonton. Maybe you have to leave Roslovic off and like just straight up punt his spot, like even harder. But I don't know. It depends on the goalie, because you might have to use Lindgren against the Rangers if you do that. That might be the issue. But, we'll see. Vancouver Canucks with a 2.9 total. Heading into Nashville, the Predators have a 3 total here. Switching the series over to Nashville, it doesn't really change much for the top line, because the top line takes top competition. They're probably going to see the JT Miller, Brock Besser line, assuming they're together. They might start together. It's just, the issue is like that Pettersson line's just been getting mauled. So they're probably going to try to balance it out, especially with Demko possibly out for the playoffs. If we get to warmups and Miller, Besser, and Suter aren't together, and it's an issue because all the games are staggered, but if you have like a late lineup and you get to warmups and it's not Besser, Miller, Suter together, like, I have a lot of interest in Nashville 1 here. The issue is if it's Miller, Suter, Besser, it's just a tough matchup. It's the same matchup they had in Vancouver, one they didn't really capitalize on because they're just an excellent defensive line. So if it is Miller, Besser, Suter, I have interest in the depth of Nashville. I think there's a couple lines you can go to here. I think Sisson Zucker is an interesting two-man. I think Novak Evangelista is an interesting two-man. It's just, the Casey DeSmith thing is just cannot be overstated. Yeah, in Vancouver can dictate the matchups. They can slow the pace down. In Nashville, Nashville's in control here. So I do like the top line. I just worry about the Miller, Besser, Suter matchup, because that line has genuinely been amazing defensively. So it would be the depth, unless Vancouver completely changes up their lines. Now, if Vancouver doesn't change up their lines, I would have interest in that Miller, Besser, Suter line at 15.8. They're cheaper than the Zibanejad line by a couple $100. The top line for Nashville is very good offensively. they're not elite by any means defensively. So unless we get different Vancouver lines, like they put Pettersson with Miller and Besser, I think it would just be that top line or bust for me.
Yeah. That Nashville top line, you talk about them defensively, 300 minutes after the All-Star break, 2.8 expected goals against, 2.9 actual goals against per 60 at 5-on-5. That, like, those are just not good defensive numbers. They're certainly below average, and they're a lot worse than you'd want from a top line that you're using in a shutdown matchup. Where Nashville succeeded is they were outscoring their problems. They've done that to great effect, at least. Well, they did that in game 2 at least anyway. But going into that Besser, Suter, Miller line, assuming that line is together, like I wrote up that line for the picks article today. Still doing those picks articles, by the way, free to read over at Stokastic.com. Going to have one up tomorrow. After that, I'm just really not sure. But so far in the playoffs, 19 minutes for that Suter, Miller, Besser line. Shot attempts are 33-9. Shots are 11-3. And high danger shot attempts are 11-1. 11-1. And they were often tasked with going out against that Nashville top line. Over the course of the regular season, nearly 200 minutes together, the high danger shot attempt margin for the Miller, Suter, Besser line was 61-28. They were obliterating, and goals were 16-4. They have been obliterating everybody that they've stepped out against, which is why I don't really think the coach should break up that line just because Pettersson's sucking. But he might have to, just because you only have, you have to win 3 of the next 5 games. But it just makes for a brutal matchup against Nashville 1. But as we saw in game 2, Nashville doesn't need 35 shots to get 3 or 4 goals by Casey DeSmith, right? Like if Nashville gets 20 shots, they could put up 4. And that's kind of the problem here is Nashville doesn't need to generate a ton to get them by Casey DeSmith. I've mentioned it in the article. The drop-off from Demko to DeSmith by goals saved above expected this year is quite literally a half goal per game, which means every 2 starts, Casey DeSmith gives up 1 more goal than Thatcher Demko would. Like, it's just absurd, the drop-off to the backup goalie. Now, it's still goaltending. Anything can happen in 5 games. I suspect that Casey DeSmith, it's more likely than not that he won't be very good. So there should be some interest in Nashville 1. Here's my problem with Nashville 1. I don't think that they go out and put up like 13 shots as a line, right? Like, Ryan O'Reilly has 3, Gustav Nyquist has 4, and Philip Forsberg has 6. Like, Vancouver is just too good of a defensive team for that to happen. So I'm kind of treating Nashville like, at least the Nashville top line, like I'm treating Washington. Like, I'm fine with one-offs. If you want to one-off Philip Forsberg because he can score 2 goals on 3 shots against DeSmith, perfectly fine. If you want to one-off Ryan O'Reilly because he's been so good on the power play, I think that's fine as well. I just don't know about full stacking Nashville 1 because particularly more so on DK than FanDuel, just because I'm really worried about not getting any of those shot bonuses. I think you're just really relying on getting a couple goals from them on good percentages. It's the depth from Nashville that I'd like a lot more. We said that in game 2. I feel a lot better of the second line of Zucker, Sissons, Beauvillier generating like 3 shots, scoring 1 goal, but they're priced down enough where you don't need a lot more than that. I wrote up Zucker in the picks article. He's been pretty good for Nashville, at least on a per minute basis. He doesn't get a ton of ice time, maybe 13, 14 minutes, but he's going to avoid that Miller, Suter, Besser line. And while, Vancouver's not still good defensively behind them, it's certainly a big drop off after that. So like a 2-man of like Sissons and Zucker, I think it's just fine. I'll also say, I think this is a matchup where you can use the 4th line from Nashville because McCarron, Cole Smith, and Sherwood, to be honest, they get more ice time than the Novak, Jankowski, and Evangelista line. The only reason Evangelista gets any ice time really is because of the power play. Otherwise, like Novak and Jankowski are like 9-10 minutes. It's the 4th line that is kind of like the 3rd line. And that Nashville line, 2.9 expected goals, 2.9 actual goals per 60. I honestly don't hate like a McCarron Cole Smith 2-man or something like that. If you want to get really different because you're paying up for Colorado, I think Nashville 4 is one of the ways to do it. So a 2-man from the depth. Otherwise, it's just picking one-offs. On the Vancouver side, as long as Miller, Suter, and Besser are together, that's the line that I like. I wrote them up in the picks article. They were really good offensively this season. You get 2 out of the 3 on the top power play unit. They're coming in pretty much bang on their top 2 stack percentage via the top stacks tool, 6.6%, 6.3% ownership. So for me, it's Vancouver 1, the Miller line that I like best as a full stack in this game, but I do like one-offs and 2-mans from the Nashville side just a lot better in general.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what Rick Tockett's going to do. That top line, the Miller line is just insane. So, like, if they're together, definitely be in play. Forsberg one-off, yeah, that's fine.
And the nice thing is like if they do just somehow nuke their line, like Vancouver could very well just go with Miller, Besser, Pettersson as the top line here tonight, right? If Vancouver does nuke their lineups, like LA2 is $300 cheaper than that Vancouver line. Like there's a straight swap you can make to a later game. Like LA1 is $1,000 cheaper. You'd have to leave some salary on the table, but it's not a big deal. There are swaps that you can make if that line doesn't come out together. So there are ways to kind of get around that.
Yeah. Let's move on to Winnipeg Jets with a 2.9 total heading into Colorado. The Avs have a 3.6. Valerie Nichushkin and Zach Parise have switched spots. So now the top line is McKinnon, Rantanen, and Nichushkin at 24,300. In Winnipeg, that line with Parise ran over the Lowry line. Now they're going to get Connor Scheifele-Velarde. Yeah, we can laugh at them too. They have a 200-minute sample together, 3.6 expected goals against per 60. How is that line going to remotely stop the McKinnon-Rantanen line? Now you add Nichushkin, who's outside of McKinnon and Rantanen, probably their best two-way player. And it reflects in the top 2 stack. They have a 50.7 on the slate, by the way. And because of their price, their ownership is 22.3% projected. Now, I feel like you're going to see a lot of McKinnon, McDavid one-offs here tonight. They're going to jam those two together and try to build around that with some depth pieces. I think full stack in Colorado 1 here is the play. They're fully correlated. They have an excellent matchup. Winnipeg couldn't stop them in Winnipeg. There's nothing to stop them now. It's just a matter of how different do you want to get after that. You know what I mean? Like putting in Makar makes it like almost impossible to stack. There's ways to get different. I think you can leave off Rantanen, put on Lehkonen, something like that, just to get a little bit creative with Colorado power play stacks. But Colorado 1 is my favorite play on the slate. I think Colorado 2 is okay, but again, with Colorado being at home, I want McKinnon and Rantanen. At worst, McKinnon in my lineup. I think you can do things with Lehkonen to get him in. If you're spending up for like Edmonton power play, I don't mind like a one-off Ross Colton or a one-off, Miles Wood. But again, like there's so many third lines where you can take one-offs from. Maybe I think I kind of prefer, like Colton Sissons out of that one-off pool. But there's options. On the Winnipeg side, that Winnipeg top line going into Colorado 1 is just a pass for me. And like, yeah, they're fully correlated, and that might be the only reason to play them. You look at these lines that trade chances, like the Crosby line, this and that, right? They're at least really, really good offensively. Connor Scheifele-Velarde have awful defensive numbers, but they don't have awful defensive numbers, but they don't have great offensive numbers to back it up. So they're going to be hemmed in a lot with this Colorado 1 line. So for me, I like Winnipeg 2 here, 14,200, 6.6% top 2 stack. They're going to see Middlestat, Lehkonen, and Parise. That's not the worst matchup in the world. You get Monahan on the top power play. You get Toffoli and Ehlers on the second power play. they don't play a ton, but at 14-2, you don't need them to play 20 minutes. You know what I mean? So Colorado 1, Colorado power play, and Winnipeg 2 for me. I honestly also think Winnipeg at 3 is in play, as it might honestly be one of my favorite depth lines on the slate.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote up Colorado 1 in the picks article just because of what you mentioned, their top 2 stack percentage. Like, at the time when I wrote the article, like, we still had Zach Parise in, but it honestly didn't matter. I think Parise, it was 40% top 2 stack. And then since adding Nichushkin, yeah, they're at 50.7%. That is absolutely insane when you consider that Connor McDavid and Artemi Panarin and Philip Forsberg are all on the slate as well. Like, it's honestly just crazy. And they were just really good offensively. Now, it should be noted, I will note this, that they weren't as good offensively with Nichushkin as they were otherwise. Expected goals and shots and goals were higher without Nichushkin, but they were still really high with them. It's like we're talking about a small drop from being super elite to just really elite. Like, that's like, we're just kind of quibbling. It is the Winnipeg matchup. Like, they're going to be going out against Scheifele, Fullerton, Connor, and like, man, oh man, have they not been good defensively. In fact, I was looking at Mark Scheifele's numbers without Nikolai Ehlers, like just without Nikolai Ehlers on his wing. Doesn't matter who else was with him. Shot attempts go from 55 against to 65 against. Expected goals goes from 2.8 to 3.3, and actual goals against basically nearly doubles. It goes up like 90%. And this is with Connor Hellebuck, the likely Vezina Trophy winner, in net. Like, this line is absolutely atrocious defensively, and they're, like you mentioned, they're not going to be able to be hidden by the Adam Lowry line taking the shutdown minutes. They are going to have to face Nathan MacKinnon like for at least half their shifts, and that is very bad news for Winnipeg. Like, I love Colorado 1 here. Yes, they are very expensive, but like, we've gone over just a ton of spots where you can pay down. Like, you talked about Washington 3. I talked about Rangers 3 from that Caps Rangers game. We just talked about the Nashville 4 line, like a fourth line that is playable here tonight because they get 13 or 14 minutes. There are a lot of reasons. There are a lot of spots tonight where you can save a lot of money and still go play a $24,000 line, $28,000 line on FanDuel. So I really do like Colorado 1. And it's not just the 5-on-5 matchup. They tore apart Winnipeg's penalty kill. And Winnipeg's penalty kill was something that they just really struggled with all season, something that they struggled with down the stretch. Over the Winnipeg's final 24 games of the season, I was looking since March 1st onward, 8.93 goals against per 60 at 5-on-5. It's 23rd in the league. If you have the 23rd ranked penalty kill going into Colorado and you're already in a bad 5-on-5 matchup, Connor Hellebuck is, if Winnipeg wins this game, it's probably because Connor Hellebuck steals it. So, and if he steals a game, then so be it. That's the way DFS works sometimes. I really do like Colorado 1. Question is, do you want a full stack? Do you want to leave off one of the expensive wingers and put on Lehkonen? Do you want to just make it a Colorado onslaught, like put the top line with the third line or something like that? Good old-fashioned Josh stack here in the playoffs. I think that's very much in play as well. Colorado 2, I think, is kind of fine. Like, Casey Middlestat and Arturi Lehkonen have found some chemistry. I was looking at Middlestat's numbers without Rantanen and Nichushkin, who are on the top line. 3 expected goals, 3.5 actual goals per 60 during the regular season. Like, if you want to play Colorado 2, I think they're in play, but I think this game is about Colorado 1. On the Winnipeg side, for as good as Colorado 1 is offensively, they're about average defensively, and their penalty kill isn't very good. And Winnipeg's power play actually isn't bad. I know they haven't had like a huge series yet. They are in a good power play matchup. It's still Alex Georgiev in net as well. He got absolutely exploded in game 1. He's not a very good goalie. This is a team that outscores their problems. I think Winnipeg 1 is in play, but for me, it'd be kind of more of a like a 20 max or something like that, right? Because I'd rather play Rangers one who are $1,000 cheaper. I would probably rather play Vancouver one who are $1,500 cheaper or something like that. So for me, it's just that there are other choices in that price range I'd rather play. Now you compare them together, I think that's fine. But I kind of agree with you. Winnipeg 3 is the line that I like best. I wrote up Adam Lowry in the picks article. They generate more shots and more goals on the road this season. I have to think part of it is that they just get away from all those shutdown matchups. Now they go into like that third line from Colorado. Like the third line from Colorado since Logan O'Connor got hurt has been very below average defensively. I think, and then once you get into like the Jack Johnson, Caleb Jones or whatever, assuming Sam Girard doesn't come back, once you get away from that Cale Makar and Devin Taves matchups and all that, I think that's where Winnipeg can actually score some goals. So honestly, on the Winnipeg side, for me, I think it's Winnipeg 3 I like best. If you want just one off Lowry or like two-man Lowry and Appleton or Lowry and Niederreiter or something like that, I think that's fine. But this game is really about Colorado 1.
Yeah, and like if they just switch Connor and Ehlers, the night and day difference both those lines would make. Like I'd still probably really like Colorado 1, but like there would at least be like an avenue where I could be like, oh yeah, can fade them here tonight. You know what I mean? I mean, there is an avenue, and his name's McDavid, and we'll talk about him right now.
Exactly.
Edmonton Oilers with a 3.2 total heading into Los Angeles. The Kings have a 2.8 total. I'm interested on who you think is going to take the shutdown matchups because I'm not sure they're going to send out Kopitar with Laferriere there.
It's going to be Byfield, Kopitar, can't be.
Yeah. Oh, they switched the lines?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes
Byfield,
a lot.
Byfield was up there, I think, the entire game in game 2.
Yeah. Okay, good. That makes this a little bit easier to break down. I mean, that line is so much better defensively. Is it enough to stop McDavid? No. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, it was kind of weird, right? Because there was 9 goals in that game in game 2. Connor McDavid had 6.5 DK points. He like has those games sometimes. They don't happen very often. You know what I mean? So I'm very much back in on Edmonton 1 here. 21-7, 22.7 top 2 stack percentage, 6.2% projected ownership. That's the big thing, right? They're $3,000 cheaper than Colorado 1, and they're coming in at a fourth of the ownership. I think this is another scenario where you can full stack. It is fairly expensive. I don't think you need to leave off Henrique. He's a good player. You know what I mean? So right, he's good. Yeah. You leave Henrique on there. The second line doesn't really interest me too much other than, if you want a power play stack, you leave off Henrique, you add on Draisaitl, you add on Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, something like that. I think a one-off Draisaitl, one-off Nugent-Hopkins are fine, but I prefer to add them into a Edmonton power play stack. Edmonton third line, I think a Kane one-off is fine, something like that. But other than that, I don't really have too much interest in the bottom 6 of Edmonton. LA is more interesting, right? So they're going to send out Kopitar, Kempe, Byfield against McDavid. They're 14-6 with 11% projected ownership. Like, it's fine, but for $900 more and a tiny bit less ownership, you get a stack with a higher top 2 percentage in Arvidsson, Moore, and Deneau, and they're going to miss the McDavid matchup. That's kind of important. And then, you go to LA3, Dubois, Fiala, Laferriere against, the bottom 6 of Edmonton. That is very interesting at 12,000. You don't need a full stack. I think a Dubois, Fiala, 2-man is fine. I don't think you can fit them in completely with Colorado. You'd have to do some pretty hard punting. But I think, a Dubois would fit in there with them, a Dubois, Laferriere. It's Fiala. That's the expensive guy on that line. But I do like LA3 against the depth. But LA2, Edmonton 1, Edmonton power play.
So here's the interesting thing about Edmonton going into Los Angeles. I don't think it's necessarily that going out against Kopitar. I think it's the fact that they're going to be out against the Gavrikov and Matt Roy pair. That pair did a pretty good job last season in the playoffs. 6 games against Edmonton last season. That pair, 3.3 expected goals for, 2.7 against. By just goals for and against, it was 6-3 in favor of Los Angeles. If you look at McDavid in the playoffs over the last 2 years last year in Los Angeles, he didn't really torch Los Angeles. High danger chances for and high danger chances against with McDavid on the ice in the playoffs in Los Angeles was 6-6. Like he didn't really put a lot together. Like that Roy Gavrikov pairing has been really, really good basically since Gavrikov got there at the trade deadline last year. And I think being able to pretty much staple them to McDavid is a matchup that Los Angeles will take all day long and just hope that they don't beat him. Now, that said, yes, McDavid is good enough to overcome this. And it's especially the power play, right? What I noted in the Picks article about the Edmonton power play is that they're clipping along at so far this season against Los Angeles, they're 8 for 25 on the power play, regular season and playoffs. That's a 32% power play conversion rate against the Kings. And McDavid is good enough to certainly take advantage of. Now, if Edmonton gets 2 power play goals and then, the 5-on-5 line gets one at even strength, then they're kind of cooking with grease. It's just they're putting a lot of stress on the power play to really come through here with them tonight. That's why I kind of like Colorado better than Edmonton, even if Colorado is, $2,600 more expensive. So I think Edmonton 1 is still in play. But for me, like if I'm going single entry, I'm probably preferring Colorado. Like that's it. It's just a matchup thing for me. I do think Gavrikov and Roy at least kind of contain him, like keep him from having a 5-point game like he did in game 1. That's just kind of the thing. And that's what kind of leans me towards Colorado over Edmonton. So I kind of agree with you. I think I'd be more interested in like Edmonton 2 or Edmonton 3. Edmonton 2, 37 shot attempts for, 24 against in the regular season. Now, they've been getting rolled by the second line in the playoffs, but they were good in the regular season. Honestly, at the end of the day, I still think I'm in on Edmonton, but it's more just one-offing. Like Connor McDavid one-off is almost always in play. If you want to one-off Zach Hyman because he's the guy that cleans up around the net and scores the goals, I think that's very much in play. If you want to one-off like a cheap Warren Fogle, like Evander Kane's been getting some decent ice time, even though he's technically slotted down on the third line. I think all those are perfectly fine. I just don't know if I'm full stacking Edmonton here in single entry. Once you get to 20 max and all that, then you might want to start including some Edmonton lineups. I'm just thinking about the way that I'm probably going to build mine tonight is probably going to be more focused around Colorado than it is around Edmonton. On the Kings side, it's the Kings second line that I like. It's more Danault, Arvidsson. I'm not super concerned about power play correlation here because they don't have a line with more than 2 guys on the top power play unit. That's Kempe and Kopitar from the top line. Got to give it up for Quentin Byfield. Like this is a guy that I was moving up and down the lineup. He'd been on the 4th line a little bit. That tip pass he had on the overtime winner in game 2 was one of the most ridiculous tip passes I've ever seen. I don't know if I've ever seen a guy redirect a pass out of midair, basically on his backhand to the middle of the ice to his forward to give him a breakaway. It was just absolutely insane. I have no real problem going with Kings 1 because they do get the ice time. Kempe has been shooting a lot. Byfield does have 18 shot attempts per 60 in the 2 games so far. So he is trying to get shots on net, but it's LA2, 3.1 expected goals, 3.1 actual goals per 60 in the regular season. Victor Arvidsson, typically a good volume shooter. They're going to get, what I think is a softer matchup going out against the Edmonton second line. Draisaitl and Fogle have certainly struggled a little bit defensively this year. LA2 also not coming in with a tremendous amount of ownership. 9.8 top 2 stack percentage, 10.9% ownership rate. So they're perfectly fine if you want to stack them with like a Vancouver, or you want to stack them with a Winnipeg, or you want to stack them with the Rangers top line, or whatever. I think that's perfectly in play. So for me, it's LA 1, then Edmonton 1, or LA 2, sorry, then Edmonton 1, and then LA 1, and then I think Kevin Fiala is probably one of the best one-offs of the night. Like, he's just getting used all over the place. I wrote him up in the picks article. Again, if you want a one-off Fogle or Vander Kane or something like that, I think that's perfectly fine. But honestly, I kind of like the Los Angeles side a little bit better here tonight.
Yeah. These games is like they've just been playing high-scoring games. It's just finding who's going to be scoring. You know what I mean? Kings spread it out a little bit. Edmonton's been spreading it. If Edmonton gets depth scoring, like, they're going to be just a tough out. But, you know, that doesn't really matter for DFS unless you pinpoint it. Let's talk a little bit about defenseman here. Top of the board, Cale Makar, 8,200. He's an excellent play here tonight. It's just a matter of being able to fit him if you're playing Colorado 1. You know what I mean? That is an expensive trip if you're trying to fit in Colorado 1 with Makar. Like, Yossi's okay. It is Casey DeSmith, but like you noted in the last show, like, Vancouver is still a pretty good defensive team. They don't shoot a lot, and they don't give up a ton of shots. So that's the issue. So I think then I'd go to, you know, like the Adam Foxes of the world, the Bouchards, the Trubas, you know what I mean? But like, top of the board, it's Makar, and it's not close.
Yeah, it is. Like, Makar's like by far my number one. He's number one in the projections as well. I don't have a ton of interest in Roman Josi. Like, I noticed Cale Makar, his projection is like 1.6 DK points higher than Josi, which is pretty ridiculous considering they're only $500 apart. So it's Makar number one. After that, I do like Evan Bouchard here tonight because, like I said, I think if Edmonton does pile on the goals here tonight, it's through the power play, and that's where Bouchard kind of racks up the points, right? So I do like Bouchard. Honestly, it's still Cale Makar than everybody else, even if he is the most expensive option. In the mid-price range, John Carlson, he's projecting well. You know, it's a home matchup against the Rangers. I think he's perfectly fine if you don't want to pay all the way up. Devin Taves, the entire Colorado top four is in play. The only thing that worries me is Sam Girard might be back tonight. We just won't know until warm-ups start. Girard would honestly be a nice defenseman to slide in. He's only 3,100. If he's not playing, like, you can basically just, you know, leave a few $100s and swap over to Josh Manson, or otherwise you can go play, you know, Brendan Dillon from Winnipeg. You can go play, I guess, Cody Ceci. Like, Cody Ceci fired, or was it Ceci that fired home? Oh, Kulak fired home that shot in game 2. That was unreal. But there are guys in Los Angeles you can swap to. So Sam Girard kind of makes a decent mid or low price play. For cheap guys, Matt Roy, Dylan DeMello, Sean Walker, and Alex Carey are at the top for me, especially with Roy probably having to take a lot of the McDavid matchups. He might have to block a lot of shots here tonight. If you're paying down, like, super cheap, it's the Washington guys. Assuming Jensen and Sandin aren't back, Trevor Van Riemsdyk, 2,800, and Alex Alexeyev, 2,600 are probably still going to have to play about 20 minutes. Depending on the blue line, we won't know until Washington has their warm-ups.
Yeah. Luckily, that's the first game, so you don't have to scramble to, like, get in some random guy on Nashville or whatever. Let's talk about some goalies here. I honestly, like, the only two goalies that I have somewhat confidence in is Igor.
Here we go, of course. I knew it. I just knew it. I was just waiting for I'm playing Igor tonight. I
don't know if I'm going to play him, but, like, I don't want to play Georgiev for $100 more.
No.
I also like the Kings here tonight, like you. So, like, I don't really particularly love Skinner. I think he has, from a GPP standpoint, I think Skinner has an obvious better chance at a saves bonus than Igor does. But I think Igor's win equity is a lot higher. I like Saros here. I don't know, man. Like, yeah, Vancouver's still a good team, but going from Demko to Casey DeSmith, they kind of have to play like Washington to win games. So, like, I don't know. Like, I think this is a winnable game for Nashville. And if I was going to spend down, it's going to be Charlie Lindgren. Like, if Washington's ever, like, this is such a bad reason, but like, if they're ever going to win a game, it's going to be this one. You know what I mean? They're at home. They got the crowd behind them finally. You know what I mean? He does get the volume. So, like, he hasn't had great results in the first 2 games, but like, if he somehow gets to the save bonus and even gives up 4 goals, I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, the goalie stats tool on Stochastic has Lindgren for the most saves here tonight, but only the 3rd most goals against, which is honestly, when there's only 8 goalies, that's really not that bad. And he's like a ways behind Hellebuck and Talbot. So I don't mind, like, I just flat out don't mind Lindgren at all. Because, like, even if he loses here tonight, like 3 goals against on with 30 or 31 saves or something, like, the way goalies have been going in the playoffs, like, you kind of take it. Yeah, exactly. I was making fun of you for Igor because you are a homer, but like, I do like Igor as well, right? Like, he does have the highest shutout equity on the goalie stats tool, so it's probably one of the goalies from that game. Otherwise, it might be going to Skinner, just because LA has struggled to score at 5-on-5 this season for long stretches, and if Edmonton can limit the dangerous chances like at all, it could be a fairly easy game for Skinner. So I don't mind him, but it's probably going to be one of the goalies from the Rangers Capitals game.
Yeah, like, I like Skinner in a nutshell, and like, he's probably of the high end, like the best chance to win with the saves bonus. Like, he just has these mental lapses in a game where he'll give up like 3 goals on 5 shots, and it just like makes me want to take a deep
Yeah, I think some of it is pressure too. Like, the Edmonton Oilers are under a lot of pressure to win. Like, this is almost a decade now with Connor McDavid on the roster, and they have one conference finals appearance. So
yeah, no, I get it. I just, I'm like daily deposit Frostback, and I demand Ben Scriven performances every night.
yeah, I get it.
He actually picked the best goalie on the slate last night, so I went out and got some lottery tickets for the first time in 10 years. He should too. But yeah, no, who are you liking for your hat trick pick?
I'm just going to go with a little bit of chalk here. One of my favorite players, honestly, of this generation. I'm really glad he kind of revived his career. I'm going with Valeri Nichushkin.
I knew you were going to do that as soon as you said revived his career. You were on him in the days of Dallas, and you were so mad when they sent him back to Russia. I'm going to go Kevin Fiala.
I like it. Another Cliffy favorite. It's kind of weird that Nashville traded him. Anyways, that's for
everyone traded him. Minnesota traded him too.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll be back tomorrow. I would imagine it's going to be a 3-game slate. They have that 2:00 game tomorrow. I would assume DK is going to leave it off the main slate. We will be here. I don't know what time. We did it noon last week, or noon Eastern last week. I'll talk to Cliffy about it. But we will be here tomorrow, and then we'll play it by ear going forward, especially if Carolina or Florida wins over the weekend. You know what I mean? The slates might get shortened, but we'll see you tomorrow. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck tonight, everyone.